Hi guys, so have you guys seen these frame TV style TVs like you see here, similar to say the Samsung Frame TV, which allows you to display artworks like we see here, or even photographs on your wall in your living area while you're not using it as a TV. Well, today I'm going to show you guys how you can turn any TV into a TV that functions somewhat like the Frame TV, the Samsung Frame TV that is. Okay, so by way of a quick demo, I'm intentionally standing very still right now. I've turned the television off using my remote control here. Now if I move, the infrared sensor down here, you'll see it's just detected my movement as I've moved in the room, and has now just turned the television on and turned it on to the HDMI input, showing my media player to display my photos and artwork that we've got loaded on the media player. Pretty cool, eh? Now, if I actually leave the room and have no motion on that sensor for over 20 minutes, it will actually turn the TV off. So that's right, I'm going to show you how to turn basically any TV into a frame style TV. That functions pretty much like the Samsung Frame TV. Now, I want to be clear here, I'm not saying I'm going to show you how to turn a TV into a Frame TV in terms of how you will physically make it look on the wall with a frame and this sort of detailing here. I'm talking about the functionality whereby when you enter your room, the TV automatically turns on and displays artworks, and when you leave the room, the TV will actually turn itself off to conserve power and actually the wear and tear on the TV itself. Because of course when you want to display artworks, and as you see here it's automatically switched from an artwork to a family photo here, you don't really want that to be running 24/7 in your household, burning electricity and wearing the screen out when you're not actually in the room. So stick around, keep watching, and I'll show you how I set this up. Okay, so this is pretty technical stuff, but I had quite a few people ask about this and want to see this in detail. So I'm going to go through and show you guys the microcontroller which I've set up to do this, which is using what's called an Arduino controller. And I'm going to actually show you the programming code, line by line, the code which I put into this to make it actually function and do this automatic turning on and off based on when you're in the room and when you leave the room. Okay, so this is actually a follow-on video from my review of this TCL TV that we have here. I did review this TV and talked about the Samsung Frame TV that we had, and also the Hisense, which I briefly had here as well. So check out those other videos as well, particularly the review on this TCL in the links down below and at the end of this video. But now this video here is quite technical. Not everyone's going to be into doing this, but I've had quite a few people ask about exactly how I make this TV automatically turn on and turn off when I come into and when I leave the room here. So I'm going to show you the Arduino programmable controller which I've got here, and I'm actually going to show you guys line by line the code that actually does this and functions. So I'm going to try and keep this as brief as possible though. So just a couple of quick notes on a couple of limitations here. They're not major, but you'll notice now when I trigger this sensor as I walk into the room, it goes through a little sequence. You'll see when it starts there, it comes to a main screen, it clicks through the input select options to bring up the HDMI 4 input, which is what I'm running the media player on to play all of our artworks and photos that you see here. Now, the only way the Arduino communicates to the television is by infrared codes. Now, to be logical here, I want this to always work when it senses someone come into the room and go through a sequence of codes to always go into this art mode on HDMI 4. So you need to work out a sequence with your TV going through your main menus to create a button sequence that no matter what stage or status someone was using the TV when they turned it off, if they left it in YouTube mode or TV mode, it goes back to a standard mode before it can then go through a standard step sequence to get to your HDMI 4 input so that it works and does exactly the same thing every time. I'm not sure if that's, am I explaining that so well, but yeah, it just depends on the particular TV and brand and what your menu options are as to what that program sequence would have to be. Trial and error and a bit of experimentation was required there. So just before I do carry on, thank you guys in advance if you click the like button and if you found this information really useful and interesting and enjoyable. Maybe even click the subscribe button and check out my other videos. Also, please do leave your comments and questions below. I do try to reply to people if you're working on this kind of project. Interested to know what you guys are doing also. Thanks again for watching this. So one additional limitation at present is that technically, if there's no motion from this sensor in the room here for over a period of 20 minutes, which is the time I've set in the program right now, it will turn the TV off. So even if somebody is sitting here watching TV rather than artwork and there's no motion sensed, it will turn it off after 20 minutes. Now, I must say that has not actually been a problem. I haven't had a single complaint from any family members that TV's turned off while they're watching TV. And that is essentially because when people are sitting here, they still tend to have some motion in a 20-minute period that will keep re-triggering the timer so the TV won't turn itself off. So just a couple of quick points. This is still my prototype version here. It's actually fully functional and it works basically exactly how I want it to. But I am still going to make a few enhancements in the programming code, which I'll come to. And obviously I'll replace this ugly looking alarm sensor here, which you'd have in your house for a security system, with some nice little units here I've bought online, which will go somewhere hiding on a cabinet, look a bit nicer. And I will probably copy the code from the larger Arduino, I'll show you here, onto a little small Arduino, exactly the same thing, but just more compact, and a little small box that we can hide down behind the cabinet here. So, but yeah, prototype version currently, but fully functional. So before I show you guys the actual programming code that runs this, you'll notice that I'm using the HDMI 4 input on this particular TV to display these photos and artworks. And I'm using an external media player, which is, here's the remote for that external media player here. It's a small little unit. I'll put a photo of that on screen. You can get them for $30 or $40 on Amazon or AliExpress. Great media players. They have a mode, when you turn it on, it auto goes into a slideshow status, so perfect for this kind of application. And I find personally it's just much easier than loading photos to a frame TV like this. The built-in photo management, the external media player setup is better and easier. And in fact, I just have all of my photos and artworks on an external USB stick, which you can then manage on your computer, which is so much easier. So here we have the Arduino controller that we're using for this project. A brilliant little controller, very cheap. They're only, what, $5 or $10 on the internet. And you can just plug it in through the standard USB interface here to your computer or laptop to load programming, your programs into the Arduino and run the programs and do the tests. And you've got all your input and output pins on here, which you can program in the programming code, which I will show you. Now we've got our output here, which I've got from one of the pins, which goes to the little infrared. If I just twist over here, right in the little corner here, you've got that little infrared LED, which outputs the signal to the TV. Infrared LED is the same as what you'll find on any TV remote. I've got our 5-volt signal coming from the television's USB port, just to detect and tell the Arduino programming code whether the TV is currently on or off. That's this cable here. We have our 2-wire connection from our motion sensor, which simply breaks the circuit every time there is motion from someone in the room. And we also have a infrared signal receiving module here, just a 3-wire connection. And we use that to, if we want to fire codes from a remote control into the Arduino and actually record and store those codes into the Arduino, that we can then use those stored codes to output infrared codes to the TV. So I'll probably use this to receive a volume up or volume down signal from the user in the room. So if that's received, it will lock the TV on until the user actually turns the TV off, rather than the timer automatically turning it off after 20 minutes. So that's your basic controller. I won't do a full explanation of Arduino. There's heaps on the internet, but I will show you the programming code now that makes this all work. So I'll show you the programming code in just a second, but just a quick explanation on the communication between the Arduino microcontroller here and the TV. Most of the communication is the Arduino sending infrared remote codes that we've stored into it to the TV through this little infrared, an IR LED, just like you'd have on the TV remote, which sends the infrared signals to the TV to turn it off and to turn it on. However, to make this work, your Arduino controller and the programming code really needs to know at any point in time, when is the TV on or when is the TV off. Now, fortunately, most modern TVs have USB ports on them. So if you connect a cable, in this case, this white cable here, to the back of your TV, when the TV is turned on, there will be a 5-volt signal coming out of that USB port, and that is fed into the Arduino. So when the TV is turned on, there's a 5-volt signal telling the Arduino the TV is on. When you turn the TV off, there's no 5-volt signal. So the Arduino microcontroller and your program code at any point in time actually knows whether the TV is already on or whether the TV is off at that point. I'll show you this in the program code shortly. So there you have it, guys. That is how you can use an Arduino microcontroller and a little bit of programming code to make a TV or a screen function like a Samsung Frame TV or one of the other Frame TVs on the market. It's really fantastic. I love the way that this works. As you can see now, I've got some fantastic artworks on display here, as well as our family photos, and it will automatically cycle through these images. But I can also, with my media player control, I can switch through to different artworks. One of my children's artworks here, and again back to famous artworks on the screen here. You can have an unlimited array of amazing photos, artworks, or images of any type you like. So we just find this absolutely magical. Every time we come home and walk into the house and we get to see something different, and history of our travel adventures and family photos, and of course these amazing artworks. So again, I hope you find this information really useful, guys. Click the like, and again, please leave your comments and questions below, and we'll see you on the next video. Okay guys, here is the magic programming code, or the software code in the Arduino controller that I've written to run this project. Now, this is not a full Arduino programming tutorial here because there's a lot to cover, but there's heaps on the internet if you do some research on Arduino programming and the basic processes. But I'm going to give you a quick view and show you right through every line of this code. So you guys, if you're really interested, you can go back and look at this video section by section and review and copy this code and use it as you wish. So what I'm actually going to do, actually firstly right at the top here, I've obviously trying to be a good programmer here, put my details of me creating it, and I have a comment section always in the top of any programs I write. So every time I do updates to a program, I try and make notes here, and I use out these commenting symbols here for every line where it's just a comment and it's not a program, a line of the program code. Now I'm actually going to jump right to the end of the program right now first, to show you the two little routines that send the infrared signal to the TV. The first one here is a little sub here called send off. So anywhere in the program where we decided we need to send a signal to turn the TV off, it will call this little sub down here, send off. And this is where it actually sends this infrared signal. I'll just highlight it all here. And that's the actual, it's only one line of code there that sends an infrared command, IR send pulse, distance width, with all these numbers in here. Now unfortunately the TCL TV here had some quite complex infrared codes, so it took me quite a while to find the include file, which is called send pulse distance width, somewhere on the internet, and I loaded that as an include file that compiles with this program, and then sends these specific numbers here, which is actually the exact data that I want to send in that infrared code signal, which the TV will recognize as an off command. So that's what turns the TV off. Now if we go up to the next section here, this is a sub command to a routine to turn the TV on. Okay, and this is called send on. So anywhere in the program where I say send on, it will send all of these infrared codes. Now you will notice that there's a lot more individual infrared codes sent here, one after the other. Now the reason for that again is that no matter what some user left the TV, what state they left it in when they turned the TV off, because it might have been watching YouTube or a TV channel or an HDMI 2, I needed to make the code here bring the status of the TV back to the main menu and the cursor at the very left of the HDMI input selection options, and then tab across the screen. A little bit complicated here. Unfortunately, I couldn't find one single infrared command for select HDMI 4. But if your TV, if it's a Panasonic or a Sony or something else, it has an individual IR code to say select HDMI input 1 or 4 or whatever, you could do it with one single line here. Turn the TV on and request that input. But unfortunately, I had to do a number of steps here. So you'll actually see here that I have gone to selecting the home button first to get it to home menu, and then I've actually done some repeats here. You'll see in all of my comments, repeat button to keep going left cursor, left cursor, left cursor to make sure we're right at the beginning, and then to tab across the correct number of times to activate HDMI port 4 here. And that's why you'll see when the TV turns on, it has a sequence of 3 or 4 seconds clicking through this to get to the correct input. So not 100% ideal, but I actually don't mind it. It turns on, you hardly notice. By the time you notice, it's got a nice little photo or piece of artwork on the screen. So that's your send on command. So now we'll go right back to the beginning of the program here, and I'll try and walk through it. Again, comments up here whenever I've done some changes and updates to the program. This program is, of course, was a prototype, so I had to do lots of testing here and changes. So the code is still quite messy, and there are things that I would change and do slightly differently. So we're going to define some initial variables here. We're saying that pin number 3 on the Arduino board is the infrared sender pin. So that goes to the infrared LED. Every time we pulse an output, goes out through pin 3. So that's where that LED is connected. We have an on sensing pin, which is pin number 11. And that is the pin that takes the 5-volt signal from the USB cable that's plugged into the back of the TV and feeds 5 volts into our Arduino that tells us that the TV is either on or off. Now, pin number 7 we've defined as the motion sensing input. So every time the infrared sensor that we currently have connected, which is just a security system type IR sensor, every time that detects a movement, it will actually break circuit, causing a trigger input to pin number 7, and you'll see that in the code. Now we've got a couple of long integers defined here, which is, the first one is our on time. So how long do we want to lock the TV in the, how long do we want before, when we have no motion sense, that we will automatically turn the TV off? And I've decided on 20 minutes, which is that number of seconds. That's our on time. And we also have here a variable I call chrono, which is actually, what that is every single time the infrared sensor triggers, that will do a timestamp of exactly when that infrared motion is just being detected into that variable there. Now we've got a couple of variables here. I've defined room active. That actually just means, is there somebody in the room? That's what room active means. On sent, that just means, have I sent an on command to turn the TV on? Another one, is TV on? A little bit self-explanatory, just means, is the TV currently on? So obviously in the code you'll see when it's checking the pin to see if there's a 5-volt signal from our 5-volt USB port, if that's on, generally the TV is obviously on. And there is a rider to that, which I discovered. When the TV turns off, it actually takes 5 or 6 seconds for that 5 volts to disappear. So I had to modify the code a bit there to take that into account, the timing issue with that. And an off sent, that means have I sent an off command to turn the TV off. Now you will see in the code that at various points when things happen, if we send an off command, that will then become true. But then of course we also will reset these values on each loop of the code. And then we've got a setup loop here, which just turns on our IR send include processes, pin modes. Okay, and we're defining the input trigger pin and the on sensing pin as an input and the IR send pin as an output. And we've got a serial begins. That's actually just for debugging. When I run this Arduino controller for testing, I can see little comments appearing right down the bottom of the screen in the serial monitor to tell me any errors and when the program is doing what I think it is supposed to be doing. So another few here. Room active initially will be false. No one is in the room. On sent is false initially. Yeah, we haven't sent a command to turn the TV on. TV is on is false because the TV is currently off to start with. Off sent is false. So you're setting these initial start points. And then we go into our main. Is it our main loop here? Sorry, it's a couple of months since I looked at this. Void loop. Okay, this is just a comment to print comments to the screen when I'm debugging. Right, and then we've got a digital read. So I'm checking here the IR trigger pin. So that's now looking at the motion sensing input. If there is a motion sense, I've got a comment here that would print in my serial monitor. Motion has just been sensed, and it will set this value chrono. It will say at this time, this milliseconds, we've detected motion in the room, and it will set that to true. Carrying on a bit further, we're doing a check here. Is the TV currently on? Read, check that pin, and is TV on true? If that on sense pin is equal to 1, which means there's 5 volts, we set TV is on as true. So the TV is actually on. Now the code knows the TV is on. If it's not, in other words, if we've turned the TV off or it's currently off, there will be no 5 volts on that USB pin. So that variable gets is TV set to false, which if is TV on set to false, sorry, that means the TV is currently off. So you're really going to have to look through this code many times yourself to really understand this, but I'll carry on. Again, here you've got a digital read, infrared trigger pin. I'm doing the same thing again here. And I'm saying here, the room active. Okay, so I've sensed movement in the room. And so I'm saying here, the room is active now. It's true. There's somebody in the room. Now, when you go through this code, you might notice there is some redundancy in the code that could be removed. Again, because this is my prototyping code, and it could do with a lot of cleanup. But I wanted to get it up on the internet so you guys can see it. Okay, we're doing a digital read here. Offset equals true. Digital reads is the on sense pin. If it's 0, offset equals true, offset pulse. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're just saying that is the TV currently off? If it is, let's just set what we're doing here is we're saying we're setting have we sent an off signal? We're setting it to false, which just allows the code to send a signal again later when we need to, because if that's still sent to true, further along in the code, it won't let us send an off signal because it will think the TV's on. Again, you're just going to have to analyze through the code here to really understand this. Another bit of section here is, okay, and you can read my comments here, which might help. So if the TV already on due to the use of the IR remote, so in other words, someone's actually used the IR remote in the room to turn it on, set the room active and the timer. Okay, turn off sequence should deactivate this on timeout. So in other words, when this times out after 20 minutes, the turn off sequence should deactivate. So once again, we are setting the room here to active because somebody's in the room and they've turned it on. And we've set it as if the infrared motion sensor has detected a person, just because we know there's somebody in the room. So there's a lot of logic in here you've got to think through. And it actually did take me quite a bit of time to think through this logic and put in the code, do some trial and error, and check what actually worked. So you'll come down here and let's have a look here. We've got digital read, IR trigger pin equals 0 and on sent equals false, and TV is false. TV needs to be turned on. Okay, I'm trying to even understand my code there. So we're checking the trigger pin. If it's equal to 0, digital read. Sorry, okay, that's correct. Because our trigger pin, if there's an infrared, if there's motion detected in the room, the infrared trigger pin will actually go to 0 volts because of the way the infrared sensor is connected up to that pin. And if the on sent is false, we haven't sent an on signal yet, and the TV is currently off, the TV needs to be turned on. Okay, so that's the logic there. So then it will actually do this magic, and it will do send on command, and that sends that section of code right at the bottom, runs that whole section of code, which is the send on command. After we've done a send on command, we actually got some delays in here where we've actually paused the program completely. And there's some reasons for that. I'll let you read that. This is not ideal in an Arduino or programming sense to have a delay, because this is actually just stopping the code from doing anything. The system will just not do anything now for this 20 milliseconds, etc. Not the best way to do it. I will change that one day by using the mils and a timer count, because once you've got a delay pause, it will not be doing any other checking anywhere in the code. It will do nothing until that timeout is finished. So what do we got here? On time, max time with no people in the room. So there we go. So what we're doing here is we're checking, has the current time on the time ticker now exceeded basically 20 minutes, and room active is false. There's no one in the room. Room deactivated, Okay, now check if the room no longer active and the TV is currently on. If so, turn the TV off. So what we're going to do is, if the room active is false, so there's no one in the room, no one's moving, and the TV is currently on, and off sent, we haven't sent an off signal yet. And if this is all the case and true, send an off command because we've exceeded 20 minutes. And that's what it does. It runs send off, which is down the bottom of the code we looked at earlier. And yada, 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 we carry on here. So I'm pretty much, we've pretty much gone through the whole code here, because we're now down to this section down here, where we've got our send on command. Just sorry, going back up here a bit further, we do want to change some of these variables. Okay, if on sent equals false, on sent, what do we got here? This is printing me a little message to the bottom of the screen. On sent is false. That's just a message to me. Now check if the TV is definitely fully off. If so, if the on sense pin is 0, in other words, that 5 volt pin from the USB is not giving us 5 volts, that means the TV is definitely currently off. So you can say the variable now, on sent, you can set that to false, which allows us to now be able to send an on signal again when we want to do that, when we detect some motion. So as you'll see in my comment here, I'll highlight, allows a turn on signal to be sent if the handheld remote was used to turn the TV off. There you go. So I think that's as much as I'm going to say about the code here that runs this whole project. You can scroll through this video and look back and forth through this code, take screenshots, and use this code to do your own projects.